And I had spent my whole life, focused on the wrong things. Just focus on, okay, more sex, more validation, more academic success. And none of it was working.
Mm-hmm.
One of the quotes that just totally changed my life was this quote, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Mm-hmm.
And it was understanding that what you do with your mind strengthens those neural pathways. And I realized that all of my engaging with porn, with sex, with academic success, I was strengthening the pathways of craving. And craving is suffering. When you want something you don't have,
Mm-hmm.
when you want more money and you don't have it, when you want this girl and you don't have her, when you want this validation and you're not getting it, you're in a state of suffering. And I realized that I was strengthening that
Mm-hmm.
suffering every time I engaged in that behavior. I was creating the own conditions for my own suffering.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Lipkowitz, and with over 12 years of meditation experience as a mindfulness trainer and coach for high performers, I've become obsessed with helping people break free from compulsive, unhealthy behaviors and addictions and step into a life of true freedom so that they can finally become their best selves and cultivate deeper and lasting fulfillment. I've created Unhooked, the Breaking Porn Addiction podcast, to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to master your mind and optimize your life. This is Unhooked. So hey everyone, welcome back to Unhooked. Today's episode originally aired on the Successful Addict Podcast with my friend Roland Cochran, and he was kind enough to let us repost it here on Unhooked. In this conversation, we dig into the heart of what it really means to pursue self-mastery, not from a place of fluff, but from a grounded, practical lens that speaks especially to high achievers. We explore some of the real reasons behind compulsive behavior, the trap of chasing external validation, and what it takes to actually feel fulfilled, not just look successful on the outside. If you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, crushing your goals, making money, but still feeling empty inside, this one's for you. We talk about everything from mindfulness and neuroplasticity to integrity, identity, and how to actually build a life you're proud to live. So, without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Roland Cochran on the Successful Addict Podcast.
What's up, everybody? I am here with Jeremy Lipkowitz. Jeremy has a podcast that some of you guys have probably listened to. I'll have him kind of talk about the podcast and where it came from and what his mission is. But Jeremy and I are going to talk about something that I'm super passionate about, and so is Jeremy. It's kind of a cool, I think it's going to be a really cool podcast session. Concept of, mindfulness and self-mastery. I'm a pretty practical dude. Most people know me as such. However, in the end, this is a problem of the mind. Even if you're allergic to practices and, the spiritual side of things, that's okay. I'm not going to ask you to engage in those if you're uncomfortable. What I will say, though, is you need to find some sort of mindfulness substitute. And hopefully with our conversation today, we can give people a good amount of things to try and implement so that they can do something that they believe works for them, something they're open to trying, and meet you guys where you're at. But Jeremy, how can people find the podcast? What's the energy behind the podcast? Why'd you start it? And what's your mission?
Yeah, thanks. First of all, just happy to be here. The podcast is called Unhooked, Breaking Porn Addiction Podcast, and it really looks at this issue, whether it's porn addiction, sex addiction, just bad habits in general. It looks at it from a scientific, pragmatic, practical lens. I've always been a very rational, secular type person, not interested in, as you say, the woo-woo spirituality. But at some point, I realized that I needed to master my mind. I needed to address some of these underlying issues and look at it from a more scientific, secular lens. And so that's what we do on the podcast, is we look at how to overcome some of these issues in a way that speaks to your average person, someone who's interested in science and reason and doesn't want to chant or, buy some crystals and stuff like that. So that's really the lens that we look at it from.
And it's tough that we don't have another word for it, right? It's tough that we're really bound to self-mastery, mindfulness. The problem is all the terms that have been kind of assigned to that arena sound very fluffy and vague. And it's unfortunate that they sound that way, because when you think about this, compulsive behavior is a condition of the mind, and the mind being compulsive, not necessarily you. And so it makes sense that the mastery of self or a mindfulness practice would create some sort of stop block in that. What I would love to do, I think before we go into it, would be to discuss briefly what you and I have gotten out of the practice of mindfulness and self-mastery. For me, my first kind of experience with self-mastery was before all of my compulsive sexual behavior came out. It was actually after I sold one of my businesses. I was expecting to be happy. I don't know. Everyone tells you money's going to make you happy. And so I was kind of anticipating that was going to happen. And not only did that not happen, I was actually unhappier than ever before. Ever. I mean, it was probably the darkest time of my life, which was very shocking, because it was supposed to be, at least as the stories were told to me, it was supposed to be the opposite, right? I was supposed to get this massive check. First off, I thought they were going to deliver it to my house, those big cardboard ones you see on TV. No, it's just a money wire. So for those of you who still have business, it's just is wired into your account. Very anticlimactic. But yeah, it was like nothing happened. Money hit my account. No one congratulated me. There was no confetti. It was just another Tuesday. And so that was when I started dabbling in, well, what the heck's wrong with me? Am I just plagued to be discontent and restless for the rest of my life? Am I just going to chase more incessantly? And so I ended up hiring a couple different people. And that was when I started realizing that problems are a choice, even though they don't feel like a choice, right? When you're in this situation, you view the situation through the way you view it. And so what I learned through self-mastery was I actually get a say over the situation. I get to decide the narrative around it. So if we were going to apply the agency that I learned through that practice to compulsive sexual behavior, what it taught me was, okay, I have created a reality where this is possible, where I can engage in these practices and not feel, at that point, not feel guilt or shame about it anymore. I mean, I didn't feel anything when I would do them. So it's like, okay, if I create an environment that allowed these sexual things to happen, I need to uncreate that environment. And that's, that to me is self-mastery. Is it's not judging and beating yourself up for what you did. It's understanding that I have used my power as a human being to do this, and I need to use my power to stop doing this. So that was kind of, in a nutshell, my self-mastery was, I ain't the victim here. It doesn't really matter. Childhood trauma, yes. Did things happen in my life that got me there? Sure. But in the end, I'm responsible for the decisions that I make, and that's all there is to it. And so to me, self-mastery was the science of making good decisions. Jeremy, how about you? What was if you kind of summarized your self-mastery journey and to, kind of relate it to, yes, recovery, but also your big ahas, and kind of to set up this conversation that you and I are going to have today. What did you learn? How did yours evolve?
Yeah, well, I definitely resonate with what you're saying. And I think also resonate with the lens that your podcast and your work looks at it, which is the particular plight of high achievers and people who are very successful in the world. And what was going on for me is, I was in college. I was a super high achiever. I was at the top of my game, school of 30,000, University of California, setting the curves in all my classes, getting A+ in every class. I was captain of a sports team. I had a lot of friends. I had a lot of romantic, interactions, a lot of sex. And all the things that I thought were supposed to bring me happiness weren't working. I would achieve anything I put my mind to. I would ace this exam. I would get with this girl. I would finish this competition. And what I was realizing is that none of it was bringing me lasting happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I kept feeling empty inside. And I remember having this very pivotal turning point in my life. I was walking down the street in Davis, California. And I remember the skies were blue. My life was amazing, top of my game. Everything was amazing. And I remember seeing these two girls walking in front of me, freshmen, sophomore girls in college. And I couldn't stop staring at their butts. I was just so consumed by lust and desire. And in that moment, it felt like this huge black hole opened up inside of me where I felt this emptiness. Like if I don't have that, I won't be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I realized something really interesting is that it doesn't matter how much I accomplish, how much I get or achieve, all the material wealth, all the sex and pleasure I could get. None of it was actually going to make me happy. And that was a turning point. It made me kind of question, what is happiness? Am I actually barking up the wrong tree here? And it got me interested in the question, okay, if none of the things that I think are bringing me happiness, success, validation, wealth, all this stuff, then how am I going to be happy? Am I ever going to be happy? And so that sent me down a quest of looking at this topic of, okay, well then what is real happiness? And so I went to the bookstore. I had kind of an existential crisis that day. I was like, what is going to solve this problem for me? Am I ever going to figure this out? So I went to the bookstore and ended up finding these books on positive psychology, realized that people were actually studying the science of inner fulfillment. Like people were actually starting to look at what brings genuine fulfillment and happiness and meaning to your life. And through that search, I ended up finding this book on Buddhist meditation, this book called Happiness by Mathieu Ricard. And that book totally changed my life. It was like a 180-degree turn where I realized that the things that actually bring us happiness are not about just having more pleasure, more validation. It was things like gratitude, contentment, being of service, patience, all of these inner qualities that we don't get taught in school. And I had spent my whole life, focused on the wrong things. Just focus on, okay, more sex, more validation, more academic success. And none of it was working.
Mm-hmm.
So the key insight from that book, one of the things was looking at, okay, where does real happiness come from? But the other thing was understanding neuroplasticity and understanding the way the mind works. And one of the quotes that just totally changed my life was this quote, neurons that fire together, wire together.
Mm-hmm.
And it was understanding that what you do with your mind strengthens those neural pathways. And I realized that all of my engaging with porn, with sex, with academic success, I was strengthening the pathways of craving. And craving is suffering. When you want something you don't have,
Mm-hmm.
when you want more money and you don't have it, when you want this girl and you don't have her, when you want this validation and you're not getting it, you're in a state of suffering, And I realized that I was strengthening that suffering every time I engaged in that behavior. I was creating the own conditions for my own suffering. So that was kind of what blew my mind and made me realize that I can actually, strengthen my mind in these other areas of my life. I can strengthen my gratitude. I can strengthen my sense of compassion. Those are the things that genuinely lead to a sense of well-being. So that was my kind of doorway.
Yeah, and I love that. I love the way you articulated that because, when you think about the term self-mastery, mindfulness, whatever we want to call it, really let's change it for the rest of this podcast. Let's call it something different. I call it the science of decision making. Humans are not, kind of as I heard you talk, Jeremy, humans are not we don't do things by accident. Every single thing we do, there's some sort of perceived outcome that we're getting from it, right? When we put ourselves into uncomfortable positions because we are wanting the financial reward later, it's an intentional decision. I'm going to be uncomfortable now for financial reward later, right? It's, we're not just these random people doing random stuff. Everything's very intentional. And so I think what you said there is important is you have to sell yourself on a superior strategy to get what you want. But I think also first you have to, I think both of our stories are very similar. Before you can even venture on that journey, you have to come to the decision, come to the realization that the way you're doing it now isn't going to work. And I think I think that's kind of the gatekeeper is if you don't see a problem with your strategy, you're probably just going to stay there forever. And so when we're talking about compulsive sexual behavior, there's a reason for supplementing that behavior. And I know the community, the sex addiction community tends to focus on this being a coping mechanism. for unpleasant. But again, a lot of my clients, they have pretty good lives. And so they're not really coping with something negative. They are typically using sex and women as some sort of some part of their recipe for what they want. And so I think the cool thing about taking a self-mastery approach is you start to understand that these are efforts to bring about what you want. And I think when you take, instead of focusing on the reverse engineering, what I mean by that is like, okay, what happened to me and how do I undo it? I think you can start from the beginning as well and meet the same results. And I think for a lot of high achievers, I actually think that they get better results understanding that everything they're doing is actually makes a ton of sense rather than the approach of what's wrong with you. Speak to that when it comes to self-mastery, because I think that's where self-mastery shines. And I think that's where it shines in contrast to the traditional kind of Western medicine approach is Western medicine is what happened to this person and how do we fix them? Mindfulness and self-mastery is no, there's a very sound explanation as to where we got here. And if you can find out that explanation, it's a lot easier to change. Speak to that for in your
opinion. Well, you said something really interesting that I want to touch on, which is, self-mastery is like the art of making good decisions or something like that. I forget exactly how you said it, but one of the reasons I've always been allergic to religion in a lot of ways. I was raised in a very Christian household and it just didn't speak to me, just kind of the blind faith and you can't question. But I remember one of the reasons that Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy really spoke to me was it wasn't about good versus evil. It wasn't about being sinful, or being pious. It was about being skillful with your life, making wise decisions. And what that means is, can you make skillful decisions that lead to your flourishing? And it wasn't like any particular decision is evil or good. It's like, oh, is this a skillful action? Or is this an unskillful action? Is this an action that leads to my happiness and the happiness of others? Or is it an action that leads to more suffering, to more confusion, to more pain, more sorrow, right? And so this lens that we can look at it, it's not like, oh, I'm a bad person because I looked at porn. It's recognizing, oh, when I do this, it leads to misery. It leads to feeling of not having enough, not being good enough, wanting more, right? And so we can actually, that can be the lens of, self-mastery, as you say. It's just, okay, can you make more skillful decisions? And that's what mindfulness training is. It's looking clearly, not just at the actions that we take in life, but the intentions behind those actions. Am I doing this thing because I think it's going to inflate my ego and more people are going to like me? Or am I doing this because it's going to bring more good into the world?
It's the, because I think a lot of what high achieving men fear, and this is in the sexual compulsive behavior space. This is also just guys in the mental health space in general. There's this belief sometimes that, I'm sure you've heard it before, that, there's almost a fear of killing off that guy because it's like, well, that's all. I think they know that particular ego is the one that makes me all my money. Here's what I would say to that. You might not be wrong. He might be the guy who cheats on your wife. He also might be the guy who watches porn, hits on all these girls, objectifies women, hires prostitutes. He might be the same guy. So I'm not going to tell you that he's not. Here's what I will say though. He doesn't need to stop making money and stop all the sexually compulsive things that he does. There is a way for him to make the money and stop the sexual pieces. And so I just want everybody to know that, part of one of the scary things about self-mastery is you will start to understand that some of these processes that you have become reliant on do bad things and good things. And I do think some of the fear of recovery is, well, I don't want to change too much because I like a lot of me. I like a lot of me. I don't want to change. And I'm actually going to be here to say that's okay. I think you just need to understand what part of you makes those decisions, and you need to spend the time. And again, there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can do this through meditation. You can do this through different therapy modalities. Really, I don't really care what one you choose, as long as you choose the one that works for you. But I think, to me, self-mastery is understanding there are parts of me who do really awesome things, and that part also doesn't value marriage. I think that's the key. That, to me, and again, I'd love for you to speak to it, but for me, that was like my aha with self-mastery, was these guys who I've invented to kick ass in a lot of these areas don't value marriage. They don't even necessarily value monogamy. They don't value, they love to objectify women. And they love it. They love attention from women. He values attention from women. And so what I came to realize was, I invented someone to kick ass, and he did, but he also has a lot of values that are that conflict with mine. I want to be a stand-up husband. I do not want to cheat on my wife. I never wanted to do that. And then I did, but that was because, I lost. To me, I think I didn't know that I could turn him off. So I just turned him on, and then I turned him off only when I was forced to. And so I think the danger of having him on was I didn't understand his value system, and his value system was quite different than mine. It got me into a lot of trouble.
Yeah. One of the things that this is making me think of is, like, you're speaking about some guys who they kind of still have a little bit of dust in their eyes, for they're thinking like, well, but I like this attention from women, or I want to just go sleep with a bunch of prostitutes, and that makes me feel good, right? And there's that part in all of us that just likes pleasure, that likes fun, that likes validation from women, or whatever kind of sexual orientation you have, you can replace it. The thing that at some point we have to look at is it really bringing us the sense of inner peace that so many of us, what we really want at the end of the day is inner peace. That sense of inner flourishing and well-being, a sense of purpose or meaning or connection. And some guys, unfortunately, live their whole life chasing the dragon, chasing this thing that never actually satisfies them. There's this beautiful, in Buddhist philosophy, they talk about different realms of existence. And for me, they're not real realms of existence. It's not like the hell realm is a real realm and the heavenly realm is an actual place you can go. These are manifestations of the mind. But in Buddhist philosophy, there's a few realms. There's the heavenly realm where the gods live and everything's pleasant all the time. There's the animal realm. There's the human realm that we live in. There's, the hell realm where everything's just suffering. And then there's this one really interesting realm. It's called the realm of the hungry ghosts. And it's this realm of these creatures that walk around with these huge bellies, these massive stomachs, and tiny little mouths. And so they wander around, and their mouths are so small that they can never eat enough to satisfy their hunger. They just wander around constantly hungry for more. They're never satisfied, right? And that is what it's like to be one of these high achievers that has a lot of success and validation. It's like nothing's ever good enough. You can never really satisfy that thirst. It's like you sleep with one person, but it's not enough. You get a certain amount of money, but you still want more, right? And it's a realm of suffering. Like, you can have a lot of material wealth and a lot of pleasure, and you can be a miserable fuck. It's like there's so many celebrities out there that we can look at who have all the material comforts in the world, and they're miserable. They're suicidal, right? So clearly, you don't, like that strategy alone, just having more money, just having more sex, just watching more porn or playing more video games isn't going to bring you happiness.
And I would love for you to speak to this, because this is where I lived, so I can fucking speak to this because I believed this. But I mean, I also meet guys like this all the time, and I don't think anyone would disagree with what you had said, but I think that inside it's not hitting, because they are of the belief that humans are not here for a deep sense of inner peace and connection. They're like, yeah, no, I want to like travel the world. I want to go to Japan and eat the world's best sushi. I want to, I want to have a house down there on that lake with a boat launch with my family. So I think they would push and be like, yeah, I do want that. And those things will get me that.
Sure. And more power to you. The thing is, if you want to enjoy that, you have to cultivate the mental quality of the ability to actually appreciate what you have. Otherwise, you can have all the sushi in the world and you'll be grumpy, right?
Prove to them that that's the case.
Well, it's you don't have to be a brain surgeon or a rocket scientist to understand it. It's like you can have all the things in the world, but if you're looking at it and saying this, somebody else has it better, that state, the fundamental state, is an unhappy state.
Sure.
Versus you can have that sushi and say, wow, I'm so blessed to have this sushi. I'm so blessed to be able to travel. How fortunate I am. And that is a state of happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah, and so everybody hears this. Everybody listen to what Jeremy just said there. In no way is he asking you to course correct and change everything that you've been doing. That's not necessarily the ask. The ask is, here's how I word it, Jeremy. I always say, here's what I say to smart people, savvy, successful men. I always say, if you're chasing something, just understand the promise that thing will provide. So work and crushing it at capitalism, it does come with a promise. It will give you more money. And that's the promise it delivers on. And when you buy a lake house, what's the promise that the lake house with the boat launch gives you? You have a lake that has access to the water. That's the promise. And so I just tell everybody, I say, listen, you can go get these things. I'm not going to tell you not to. Trust me, out of anybody who knows me, I like nice shit. There's no doubt about that. We're not asking you to stop. What we're asking you is to be realistic about what the thing promises. And so what I hear Jeremy saying there is, go get all the nice stuff and just understand that the promise of a nice car is that it drives really, really well. It might be extremely fast. The leather might be of the top quality. And when you're in it, it might make you feel really cared for being in a handcrafted, rare 1 of 500 vehicle. And maybe the way that it drives and the way it sounds might excite you. And that's the promise that it delivers on. But I think what I heard Jeremy say there was, to truly experience peace and joy, you need to engage in a practice that has been promised to deliver that. And I think that's where people get a little, I think that's where everything starts to go wrong, is they believe that these things are going to promise them things that if you really stopped for a second and wrote down what you actually think that promise is going to be delivered on, come on. I mean, it's like, what part of banging a prostitute's going to deliver on that? What part of hooking up with that one chick at that work conference is going to deliver that? And I think that's where it starts to fall apart, is we haven't checked the promises that we think these things are going to deliver on.
Yeah. And a lot of the problem is that the promise, the happiness that they bring is fleeting. Mm-hmm. It's like an unstable, it's not a solid foundation. It's not a solid thing that gives you that happiness long term. It's like it might give you a moment of, oh, I feel good, or people, are thinking I'm cool or rich or whatever it is, but it's not lasting. It's unstable. Whereas if you can learn how to find that sense of well-being from within, from being a good person, from a sense of integrity, one of the things that so many of my clients, the people I work with, resonate with is this thing called the bliss of blamelessness, which is this feeling that you can experience when you're living in integrity, you're living a good life, that you're a good person and you're being of service to the world, and you're not cheating people, you're not lying, you're not, scamming anyone, you're actually just living a good life. There's this bliss of blamelessness that you can experience, the ability to walk down the street and know that you have nothing to hide, that, you haven't done anything wrong or unethical. And that feeling of like, oh, like, I know that I'm a good person. That feeling is worth more than any money in the world, because you could be a trillionaire, You could have all the money, all the sex, all the pleasure, but if you fundamentally inside feel like a piece of shit, if you feel like, oh, I need to hide stuff, or if people knew the truth about what I do behind the scenes, then they're going to leave me. If you have that sense of lack of integrity, you're going to be miserable no matter how much success you have. And until you start to develop the skill of integrity, the skill of, hey, I'm grounded, I'm centered, I know that I'm a good person, I can trust myself spontaneously. Like, that is priceless, because it allows you to live just a free, full life where you can be happy. It's like we all just want to be happy. We want to feel good, right? We want to
Speak to this, because there's a decent amount of guys who know they're doing something wrong. That's why they're hiding it. But at the same time, they're also like, I'm not really doing, my wife thinks it's wrong, but like, I don't know. What she don't know, don't hurt her. So what would you say there then? Because it's like, yeah, you're walking around. Because again, I think those guys walk around in a different level. They're not walking around ashamed of themselves per se.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the guys in my groups, I mean, it's not until they get caught that they really start to be ashamed of themselves. But I mean, for the 20 years leading up to that, they're like just doing they're doing their thing, having their little hookups here and there. And I don't think they walk around in a ton of shame. What would you say about that? Because again, that's a different, I think a lot of them believe that they are experiencing a peaceful, blissful existence. Again, until I got busted, I don't know, life was pretty sweet.
I mean, there is something to the ignorance is bliss saying, like, if you are just so ignorant and so self-centered and so cocky that, it's unfortunate for everyone around you, because everyone around you is suffering because of it. And you just got to realize, like, you're actually more of an asshole than you realize, and other people are suffering the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And someday you might wake up to the trail of destruction behind you, the ruined relationships, the hurt feelings, the lost money, the lost sense of integrity, the bad reputation that you've built, the bad legacy. I know you've talked a lot about legacy. It's like, at some point you might wake up and say, man, I wish I had seen this sooner and started walking a path of integrity sooner. But for those, most people, they have this sense inside, like, something's not right about the way I'm living. Or at least if they're at 90%, they're like, I know I could be living a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And for that,
I think they blame, I think the way they get out of it is by blaming something else besides themselves. Something's wrong, but it's not me that's wrong. I don't have enough yet, or
exactly.
Women don't get it. Right. It's something outside of them. And the reason I kind of went this route, and the reason I keep doing this with you, is poking holes in this and jabbing over here at that. It's not to bust your balls, Jeremy. It's for the audience to understand this is why Jeremy and I are talking about mindfulness. Is, as we've talked on, we're talking about a ton of different ways of seeing yourself, ways of seeing the world, ways of seeing women, way of seeing right, ways of seeing wrong. I think that's the message I'm trying to deliver here. Why I keep poking out these contrarian philosophies isn't because those are my philosophies. They're not. I'm just saying them to have the other side of things, not to bust your balls, but to prove to the audience that's what we're talking about here. Conscious living is every day picking between a bunch of things that look true, and you have to decide which one is true. And I think it's never been harder than now to make that decision, because I think the reason that a lot of the guys in my groups have even got here was, it's almost like I feel tricked, Jeremy. Hey, it's like the world told me, get money, get six pack, hook up with chicks. Like, that was what they said to. And then now all of a sudden I'm getting in trouble for the thing that, like, every movie and every, college, like, this is what everybody told me to do. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm supposed to, like, turn it off and not. And so I think, my point of constantly kind of poking around at this is conscious living's more difficult than it sounds.
way more. And it takes a level of humility that most people just don't have. There's two things I'll say that come to mind. And I love that, I don't take any
I know
offense
you
to it. I
don't.
love
If
that
you
you're
did, I
pointing it at
wouldn't
me.
be doing it to you.
Yeah. There's two things that come to mind. One is that one of the most impactful things, well, let me seed both so I don't forget. One is about the felt experience
Mhm.
of craving. So just remind me to come back to that, the felt experience of craving. But the other thing is, one of the things that was really helpful for me in my, realization and having some insights about this was being able to envision the future of the path that I was on and to really say, okay, if I keep going down this road, because I was successful, getting all these things. And I looked at it and I said, if I keep living the way I'm living, where is this going to lead me?
Hmm.
And what I saw is I was going to be some, 60, 70-year-old man who was trying to hook up with college girls at bars and lonely, no stable relationship, just chasing pleasure, chasing success, you know, never feeling like it's good enough. Like I would always get more and more and more, have more and more success. And I realized my future was going to be miserable. I might have a lot of money and a lot of sex, but to what end?
Mhm.
Like, what was it going to lead me to? And what I really wanted was a future of connection, like a family, deep relationships where I could, feel safe and be of service and support for others. So just one thing is like, if you're struggling right now to say, well, what's the problem with this? Do some of these envisioning practices that I'm sure, Roland, you talk about, I talk about in my program. It's like, look at where this is leading you 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. What's the future that you want? And is it one where you're just, chasing women and chasing money and you're one of those miserable old men that never feels like he has enough and has a huge ego and says, look at how much stuff I have? Or do you want, a contented life with a family and being of service in your community, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is like, if someone is saying, well, what's the big deal? Like, my wife doesn't know, I'm having fun. The felt experience, this is why mindfulness is so important, is to be able to pay attention to how you feel in the moment of acting out on these things. A fascinating study they did on quitting smoking, they found out that the most successful intervention program was a mindfulness based program that didn't ask people to stop smoking cigarettes. They simply said, if you want to smoke, smoke, but really be mindful
Mhm.
while you're smoking. Pay attention. Like if you want to smoke, go smoke, but pay attention. How do you feel? And that was the most successful intervention program. And we can do the same with acting out with porn or escorts or whatever it is. How do you feel when you're doing that compared to how do you feel when you're genuinely acting out of
Mhm.
generosity? When you are helping someone who's in need of help? When you are practicing gratitude for what you have? When you're practicing equanimity and saying, oh, what I have right now is enough. And I want to spend this extra money that I have on being of service in my community. Maybe I also want to buy some nice things. I like nice things too, Uh, Everybody in my close personal circle knows that I buy nice things. I don't buy shitty things. But it's like, recognize how these things make you feel. And what we know through science now is that what really makes you feel good is when you're being of service, when you're practicing contentment, when you're being vulnerable. It's like those are the things that bring us real happiness.
Well, and I think for everybody listening too, we're not asking you to change. It's usually a subtle shift. I'm not asking you to stop getting attention and being admired because we know that's a need. Esteem is a human need. We want to be respected, admired, and appreciated. I'm saying, what part of going down on Broadway and trying to get a bunch of women to say nice things about you? What other strategies exist to get respect, admiration, and appreciation? Because again,
I want to say something about that because
you know what I'm saying?
it's something that that like the admiration thing. Like you're so right. Like there's nothing wrong with getting
Mhm.
admiration, and it's a need. We need people to appreciate us and to acknowledge us for the hard work we do. It's the addiction to the thing that's the problem. It's the feeling of I need this admiration, and I will go to any means to get it, and I will sacrifice my values and sacrifice my integrity to get it. I need that in order to be happy. I need this sex in order to be happy. It's the addiction to the thing, not the desire for the thing itself.
Yeah, I always tell everybody if it's the challenge with both sex and buying stuff is it's very, the red flag should be in the ease. I mean, if it's not that hard to go out and buy something nice and then show people that you bought it. It's not that hard to go out and get some random ass, or pay for it if you want it faster and more efficiently. Right. And so, the ease of of how easy that is should be a red flag that it's not going to really stick, because here's the thing: to be truly respected and admired comes from doing something hard. Comes from doing something that other people are not willing to do. Comes from doing something very, the high likelihood of failure, potentially being ridiculed because you're the first person introduced. I mean, every time someone's done something, Martin Luther King Jr., you name these people who've gone in and did something. The reason that Elon Musk and Martin Luther King Jr. are talked about is Elon Musk went into an industry that the 7 people before him failed miserably. And so for him to come in and think like, no, electric cars are the future and I'm going to be the one. Why? Like there's literally a bunch of other people who just tried to do this who completely failed. And now he pulled it off and people admire him for it. And he's not stopping. He's continuing to do it. He's doing hard stuff because he's accomplished everything easy and he's only interested in doing something extremely challenging. But my point of all of this is, to your smoking analogy, and again, we're coming back to mindfulness, self-mastery. It's not what you're doing, obsessing over, hey, I can't do this, I got to stop doing this. It's more so, what's the objective? And is there a superior way of getting this exact same thing? And that's where I think is more effective. I think when the emphasis is on, hey, just stop doing this sexual stuff, I don't know if you're going to stop, because your body's going to be like, well, I like to convince her to sleep with me. I like that. It feels good to me. It's like, okay, I'm not going to tell you to stop. What is it that you like about that? When you're courting her and you're grooming her so that you can increase the likelihood of her saying yes when you invite her back to your place. Because a lot of guys will tell you that's their favorite part. Their favorite part's not the sex. Their favorite part's getting them to say yes to come back to their house. So it's like, okay, I'm not going to tell you to stop. If that's your jam. But again, kind of back to the smoking analogy, what is it that she's giving you when you're grooming her and courting her? And she's looking at you and saying those things. And what is it that's happening there? And then that's where I would ask yourself, can we duplicate that in a meaningful way where it lasts longer than a day? Because the problem with that, I don't even say a day, because usually they're regretting it by the time they're sleeping with her. So it hardly lasts a few hours. That would be my question: is there a way to get someone to look at you that way that lasts a month, 2 months, 3 months? And I'll tell you, as a keynote speaker and somebody who is talented at that, the looks that I get from those people, I can ride that wave for 12 months. I still don't forget the people sitting in the front when I was delivering that keynote, right? Whereas like the girls I courted and groomed, I don't remember their names. I don't remember what they looked like. I don't remember their facial expressions. I've moved on. But yeah, I remember the people who sit in the front when I deliver a keynote speak and they start crying and they stand up and give me applause. Like, I remember the look of their face and I remember how it made me feel. Yeah. So that's what I would say is I have 2 options now. I can go downtown and groom someone and try and convince her to sleep with me, or I can spend 127 hours creating a moving keynote speech and watch what it does to the person's face when I deliver it. And that's where you have to, to me, the issue isn't to sleep with a girl or not sleep with a girl, because I think if that's the option, well, I'm going to choose sleep with a girl. But again, what if the option was sleep with a woman or go get respect, admiration, and appreciation in this capacity? Now, if those are the 2 on the table, okay, this one's going to give me more what I want than this random hookup. Right.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And I think there's also a part of the conversation that we're missing here, which I know you and I talked about on my podcast, which is if you're still only after admiration and respect, you're still playing the game. You're still kind of locked in this single pointed, like fixed focus thing that's missing so many other components of what it means to be a well-rounded, flourishing human being. Like if you're still stuck on wanting to feel good all the time, and whether that feeling good comes from the validation from some hot woman that you're trying to sleep with, or the feeling good comes from even from, people saying, wow, you're such a good person. I love how you're being of service in the world. Even that is still kind of missing the point that it's a trap that we can get on of like, in order to be happy, I need to feel good all the time, as opposed to recognizing happiness is beyond that. You can fundamentally change the strategy of your life where you're not just addicted to, because that's, if we were to bring it back to like porn addiction and video games and junk food, and it's like so many men of our generation are just addicted to feeling good, and they don't know how to get off of this trap of I need to feel good, I need to feel pleasure all the time, and if I don't, I freak out. That's why I need to obsessively scroll on social media to get my dopamine hits. And then I need to go eat some junk food. And then I need to lay on the couch. And it's like, they don't know how to actually say, oh, I'm feeling, unpleasant, and that's okay. Like, it's so valuable to get off this rat race. Even if it's like better levels of the rat race, there's still value in saying, oh, I can also get off that hamster wheel. And I can actually just say, oh, I'm feeling sadness, and that's okay. Or I'm feeling, whatever it is, grief. I'm feeling loss. And that's okay. And I can just be with this human emotion, and I don't need to cover it up by getting people to like me or say, hey, you're a good person, because all of it is impermanent. Another Buddhist thing that is so powerful for me is this thing called the 8 worldly winds, which is in Buddhism, there's these 8 winds that pass through everyone's life. And they're 4 pairs of opposites. There's pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame, and fame and disrepute. And these are winds that pass through everyone's life. Sometimes you have pleasure, sometimes pain. Sometimes you have praise, and sometimes people blame you for stuff. Sometimes you gain things, sometimes you lose things. Sometimes you get fame, sometimes you get a bad reputation. You can't control the winds, and trying to is a losing game. But if you get beyond that,
I love what you're saying essentially, because a lot of people, this is a struggle for a lot of people, because it's like, I don't want to feel shitty feelings. Again, that's not necessarily what we're saying. To me, where I finally got on board with that was when I realized that the shitty feelings were telling me how to be more me, how to get more of what I wanted. That was where I started finally saying, okay, fine, I'll feel them. Because again, at first everyone's like, it's okay to feel this way. And I was like, no, it's fucking not. I don't want to. But that's what I started realizing was they didn't quite finish the job. And that's, to me, that's where self-mastery, if you really go into this all the way into it, that's what you'll start to realize is that these unpleasant feelings are there for a reason. And I think to your point, that's for all the listeners, if becoming the best you and fulfilling your potential is what you want, which as a high achiever, I most certainly know it is what you want. To Jeremy's point, shielding yourself from the unpleasant feelings scientifically is actually harming your ability to get there. It'd be like not looking at your stocks that are red and only looking at the ones that are green. It's like, bro, your money's still over there. Like, I know you're sorting it by green only, but like, it's still losing money over there. You might want to pop your head over there and see it. You wouldn't do that. You wouldn't do that.
It's worse than
people
that.
do that with their self-mastery. People go, oh, I'm just going to focus on the green ones. I don't want to feel the red ones. But it's like, bro, I don't know if it works like that.
And not only that, it's worse than that because it's not just sticking your head in the sand and not looking at it. It's when you actively want to avoid it, what happens is you end up focusing on it more. So I was actually, just saw this quote yesterday and it really resonated with me. It comes from Connor Beaton, from Man Talks. Really great guy. In his book, he says, the work of men begins with pain because a man who avoids his pain is a man who is enslaved by it. And this is the thing. It's like if you are avoiding unpleasantness in whatever form, physical unpleasantness or mental unpleasantness, which is somebody doesn't like me, I'm not getting validation, that's unpleasant, right? If you are avoiding that pain, you are enslaved by it because you're constantly running from this, I need everybody to like me. I need to have pleasure, and it's the mental slavery is what we're really talking about. And freedom is the promise on the other side. Can you be free from who cares if somebody doesn't like me? Who cares if I don't have pleasure all the time? I'm a free man. I'm content and grounded. Whether I have money in the bank or I don't, I know I'm grounded and content. Whether I have external validation from this woman or not, I know I'm grounded and content and have integrity. That's the freedom.
It's that's self-mastery. I mean, to me, self-mastery is I'm playing the game for me. And if you guys don't find this impressive yet, that's okay. And if you guys never find it impressive, that's okay too, because I find it impressive. And I think that's the thing is I'm not telling you to stop chasing. You said something earlier about, being caught up in the admiration, respect game. The safest way I have found to stay there and get it is to play the game the way that I want it to be played. So if I want to be appreciated and recognized and admired for this, I'm going to do it whether I end up getting the respect, appreciation, or admiration or not. That's the sustainable way. And trust me, from somebody who played it the unsustainable way for so long, when it always hinged on somebody else's reaction, it was entirely unsustainable and extremely fleeting. But when it was like, you know what? I want to be a guy who is admired for this, respected for that. And if I'm not going to let them tell me it's not cool because it's cool to me. That was where I started playing the game for me and listening to my motivation to go, hey, Roland, go over there and help those people for a bit. The old me would have been, that's not cool. No one cares about guys who help those people. The new me says, well, I care about it. And if they want to admire me for it, they can. But I admire me for doing it. And, ever since I kind of made that shift, everything got a lot easier and a lot more fun because now, now I get this one little teeny comment. There's this guy at the country club here. And he found out that I was publishing my sex addiction book that is going to come out late this winter. And he thinks I'm the coolest guy for writing it. And it's so funny because I haven't really told anyone. I wrote the book for me. I don't care if people like it. I wrote it because it was things that I felt like need to be said. But I'll tell you what, that guy's little comments about it, he's made 3 comments on 3 separate occasions. I'll tell you what, those comments mean so much to me. Because he's honoring me being me. And there's just something that feels good about that rather than somebody honoring me for, some shit I bought. It's just like, I don't know, that doesn't stick. Right. So Jeremy, if people are going to start on this, where do they start? And then if they want your help, where do they go?
Well, I think it starts with self-awareness. It's so important. Just as we were talking about earlier, like if you're not really clearly seeing what's going on in your life, there's nothing that, Roland can do. There's nothing that I can do if you're not able to see it yourself. Like, unless you really see what's going on in your life and the trail of destruction behind you, you're not going to be able to break free from that trap. So starting with some kind of self-awareness practice, it can be mindfulness, it can be meditation. We could go into how mindfulness and meditation are very secular things. You don't have to join a religion. You don't have to join a cult. You don't have to become a Buddhist. It's a way of just looking at what's going on in your mind. And in this day and age, there's no excuse to not be able to get into it because there are millions of different access points, right? Different
Yeah,
apps.
and if you don't like one, move on. Like I'm telling you, don't say, "Oh, I tried that. I tried mindfulness, it didn't work out. I tried self-mastery, it didn't work out." You got things from my program that are extremely tactical. It's like a math formula that a bunch of wealthy men use together. Then you can go all the way on the other spectrum where you're doing silent retreats, you're drinking plant medicine. I mean, there's a huge spectrum. So I just want everybody to hear that. There's no excuse. I agree with that, Jeremy.
Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why I created my mindfulness program called Mindfulness Made Easy. It's like it takes it from a very secular lens where you're really understanding what you're doing in mindfulness, not just closing your eyes and trying to block out your thoughts. There's so many misconceptions these days around what mindfulness is. And so finding a program that resonates with you, finding a way to learn it, but really just becoming self-aware. Journaling can also be a form of self-awareness. Talk therapy, finding ways to explore what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Guys, seeing your fucking therapist is self-mastery. I mean, just having discussions about what goes on in your head and if it's true or not, and if you want it to be true, and if you want to be thinking those thoughts, that's still self-mastery. I mean, this is not, I appreciate you painting that picture for us because my reaction is it's whatever the hell you need it to be. You just need to take control of your life and stop acting like you're a victim of your life. That's what self-mastery is. It's the pivot of, I actually get to decide what I'm interested in, what I want to do. And a lot of people don't feel that way. They feel like being victims of their life. Jeremy, where do people find you? What's we know the podcast, repeat it again. What platforms is it on? Where's your website? If they were trying to work with you, where do they go?
Yeah, so Unhooked, Breaking Point Addiction Podcast. It's on all the major podcast platforms. I'm on Instagram at Jeremy Lipkowitz. You can go to jeremylipkowitz.com or unhookedacademy.com. But, if you really just send me a message on Instagram, find me on Instagram, send me a message, go to my website, find the contact link. And we have a community of men. There's the program, lots of different ways to connect with me and the work that I'm doing in the community that I'm running. So just, find a way to send me a message.
Reach out and let him guide you to the right spot. Jeremy, this was awesome, man. I got a feeling, I think we both talked about on your podcast, on my podcast, this will probably be you'll probably be a recurring guest, just to kind of inject some of this. I think you and I have really interesting conversations. And I think that hopefully the listeners feel the same. If you do feel the same, shoot Jeremy or I a message, because it's always nice to know that we're going the right direction. We're just trying to help. And if there's a direction that you guys want Jeremy and I to go, send us a message and we can go that direction too. So thanks.
One last thing is
Jeremy.
just a little shout out that my interview with Roland is now out on my podcast as of yesterday. Depending on when this episode gets released, it might be a couple days old or a week old. But go and check out my interview with Roland on the Unhooked podcast.
Yeah, thanks, brother. Appreciate it.